Trump's not crazy for wanting to buy Greenland. The real insanity is what Washington is doing to the dollar while everyone laughs at the map. Keep watching, because in a minute Bessent reveals the one decision in D.C. that could flip global power, and almost nobody noticed it.
After a while, right? It's okay. We don't turn into total globalists, but we understand it's important to be here.
Yeah, well, it's good fresh air, Joe.
And we have a great view. Before the president departed yesterday, his intention is to talk about the United States and the position of the United States in the global economy based on the last year and a half or whatever it is. And we're going to do that, but Greenland might have gotten in the way a little bit. What do you think about the comments, just the most recent ones about Norway? I can interpret them if you can. I can understand what he meant.
Well, which comment? Because I think what the president wants to talk about, what I want to talk about, is that this is the one-year anniversary of the president taking office. We have the strongest economy in the world. We have the strongest military in the world. And the U.S. is back, and this is what U.S. leadership looks like.
Before the president ever rests on his laurels, and many times he's moving on to the next thing. And what I was leading to is I don't think it's a quid pro quo with Norway. I think he's saying, look, I've had 8 peace deals. I've settled them all through peace. This is essential for security for both the world, for the United States, for Greenland, for Denmark, for Europe. And one way or another, we got to get to where we're going. And I think that was what his point was. Do you agree with that?
100%. 100%. I think it's a complete canard, and if, like, there's any kind of equivalence with the Nobel Prize. This has been on the president's mind since his first term. It's been on the presidential mind for 150, 160 years. The U.S. has been trying to acquire Greenland. This is not something new, Joe.
And things like this happen all the time. It's happening right now with Diego Garcia in Mauritius and the UK. Territories change, and Denmark is not really in a position to defend Greenland. We fund NATO, most of NATO, so we're already defending it.
So, Joe, since 1980, the U.S. has spent $22 trillion more on defense than the rest of NATO has. $22 trillion. That is approximately 2/3 of our outstanding government debt. So while the Europeans were building schools, having health care, we have been defending the world, and I think the president believes they should be paying their fair share, and he is trying to get in front of this. He's trying to get in front of it because Greenland is strategically important. It's strategically important for his Golden Dome project to protect the U.S., and he's invited Canada into that if they want to pay their share. And it is important that the U.S. has control of Greenland, and that will stop any kind of a kinetic war. So why not preempt the problem before it starts?
And likely, in your view, it would end in some type of diplomatic event, not something more serious. I think that's the worst case scenario. The president always talks on the front end, shock and awe, I think, and doesn't take anything off the table, working on the negotiations on the back end, or as a prelude to that.
Well, look, I think the president should take everyone should take the president at his word. And I think the other thing, too, is just like with Liberation Day last year, not you, Joe, but the media has gone into hysterics. The Europeans are going to sell their U.S. assets. The U.S. is not a reliable partner. U.S. is a reliable partner. I can tell you, I hosted at Treasury last Monday a critical mineral summit to try to get the rest of the world to move with the speed that the U.S. is to avoid this chokehold that China has on critical minerals. So we had our G7 partners, Mexico, India, South Korea, and Australia there, and this is what U.S. leadership looks like, Joe.
There will be talk over here, no doubt, and I'm looking forward to the president's speech tomorrow about how this happens. And there's 10% tariffs on February 1st. There's possible retaliation with a coercion principle that you would, at this point, urge the Europeans not to go that route, or at least for things to just cool off a little bit and try to do this through dialogue.
Well, having worked with the Europeans, my guess is their next move will be to form a working group, the dreaded European working group that
We've seen a lot of working groups over the decades.
We've seen a lot of working groups.
It's hard to make decisions in Europe. It is. And sometimes...
Well, Joe, 4 years into the Ukraine war, they're still buying Ukraine energy. They are buying refined products from India made from Russian oil. So 4 years in, the Europeans are still financing the war against themselves.
All right. Let's talk about...
But Joe,
yeah.
what I do want to say is,
yes.
Same thing that I said after Liberation Day on April 2nd, everyone take a deep breath, do not escalate, and President Trump has a strategy here, hear him out, and then everything will be fine.
When I hear people say the U.S. is in dire straits, there's chaos, et cetera, I just list about 5 or 6 things. Okay, stock market, new highs almost every week. I don't know about today because there's a lot of tumult around what we were just talking about. GDP, multi-year highs. Unemployment, basically we're at full employment. Inflation 2.7%, you could, depending on what you talk about, go down from as high as 9%. Southern border is secure. Trade deals all around the world. Trillions of dollars of investment flowing here. I always ask, where's the rub? Why so sad?
Again, I think the President's had an incredible year. He's done peace deals, trade deals, and tax deals. We have the one big, beautiful bill done on July 4th. On the corporate side, full expensing for equipment, for factories, for farm structures, for working Americans, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of American-made cars. We're going to see record tax refunds. I'm also the IRS commissioner. I can tell you we're going to see record tax refunds coming out in the 4th quarter for working Americans. We've had a CapEx boom, up 12%. History will tell you CapEx boom always follows an employment boom. I'm not sure. We are the envy of the world. We have higher nominal growth than China.
Let's talk about the nominal growth. Are numbers that, when you say them, it's hard to even grasp it. So 8% is possible at this point. Well, that's what it was in the last quarter. I think if you had
it was 7 or 8%, and we are moving along at a great pace. And again, the president's economic agenda was a 3-legged stool: trade, tax, and deregulation. You know what's really kicking in now, Joe, is the dereg.
That takes the longest.
That takes the longest, but we're seeing it. We're seeing it. Treasury and the financial regulators, safe and sound deregulation in the banking system, getting more lending into the regulated banking system. Oliver Wyman believes that we've created $2.5 trillion of lending capacity that can go. I have made a big push on Main Street with small banks, community banks, because they power Main Street. And I think Wall Street can do well, Main Street can do well, and I think we're about to see it in spades for 2026.
When you said that in this term for the president that you could get, I guess, debt to deficit, or
deficit to GDP.
Deficit to GDP down to 3%. We were at 7%, were we not?
We were for calendar year 2024. We were at 6.9. Calendar year 2025, 5.4. 5.4. So that's a combination of controlling spending and the higher revenues, substantial portion of that from tariff income.
And 3% is still possible by the end of...
Well, at this pace, we may be there before the end of that.
Let's switch to the Fed, because we've had a lot of comments recently. You don't know when the announcement's going to be made, or what's... There's things happening today, I guess, at the Supreme Court regarding the Fed. Jay Powell's planning to visit to watch the proceedings with Lisa Cook.
Well, couple of things, Joe. My guess is that the president will reach a decision maybe as soon as next week. We've had substantial conversations about this. We've run a process that started in September. 11 very strong candidates. We're now down to 4 candidates. The president has personally met with all of them, and it's going to be his decision. In terms of the Supreme Court hearing, I believe, I'm not sure whether it's today or tomorrow, Jay Powell has announced he's going to attend, and Joe, I got to tell you, I actually think that's a mistake, because if you're trying not to politicize the Fed, for the Fed chair to be sitting there trying to put his thumb on the scale is a real mistake.
And there's a lot to talk about, obviously, with Jay Powell. There's this great economy that you were just talking about. So obviously the Fed has managed rates to the extent that it allowed us to get to where we are right now, notwithstanding what we saw a couple of years ago when maybe the Fed was too slow in the face of that inflation, the post-pandemic inflation. But there are other things that you've pointed to. Jay Powell is not just the chairman that sets interest rates. He runs this huge behemoth of an organization, unelected, that is a huge part of Americans, of their lives in this country. And you're CEO and COO of that organization, and that's where you have some issues.
Look, I think that the Fed's monetary policy independence is very important. I think that a lot of the issues around the independence are being created by the other things that are happening. So, let's look. Under Chair Powell's watch, we will have seen between 4 to 6 governors and presidents have to resign for ethical issues. That's out of 19, Joe. If that happened at a Wall Street firm, CEO would be out. And
we found out in hindsight most of the time. We're not sure why. It's not transparent.
And it's not transparent. And again, the independence does not mean lack of accountability. The Fed has a special obligation to the American people because it influences their lives, but they are unelected. They are not subject to appropriations. They have magic money. They print their own money. This big cost overrun for the Fed building, they'll just print more. They'll just print more money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with some accountability. And look, just to be clear, the Federal Reserve is now losing $100 billion a year. $100 billion a year because of mistimed asset purchases. I think that was a big mistake.
How does this resolve itself? I know that this isn't your purview necessarily, but do you see perhaps there are a couple of things that we wanted Chair Powell to make clear? If that were done, would the subpoena go away at that point? There's a delegation of senators coming. They're not going to. Senator Tillis, I don't think he's going to be not running for re-election, obviously, but he's saying they won't even bring up a nominee until this is settled.
Well, a couple of things, Joe. I think that any of the 4 nominees are very, very strong candidates. 2, I don't know about you, if I got a subpoena, or if it wasn't initially a subpoena, it was questions from U.S. Attorney's Office, I would answer it. So perhaps these questions could be answered and we can move along. I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation.
I think I saw another interview you did that we need, in your view, a Fed chairman similar to Greenspan that cannot get too agitated about a hot GDP number and think it immediately translates to resurgent inflation because of productivity.
Well, it's clear that we are at the nascent stages of a productivity boom, not unlike the 1990s. I tell all your viewers, go back and read Bob Woodward's book, Maestro, about Alan Greenspan and how he correctly let the economy run hot, that we had very substantial GDP growth. We were able to pay down a lot of debt. I don't know if you remember, Joe, but in the into the 90s, there was talk, well, what are we going to do if there's no government debt? Or what if we're going to do if there's not a deficit? And that would be a nice position to be in. But I do think it's important to have an open mind, let the economy do what it's going to do, understand that we are in a productivity boom, and let's see what happens, because my prediction is that inflation is going to drop substantially this year. Observable inflation is very different than reported inflation. We're seeing rents drop. We're going to see health care drop. So, yeah, I think a very good chance the Fed's going to be back on target.
Do you have any issues, and we'll wind down, but do you have any issues as a private sector, free markets guy, 10% on cap on credit cards, or lessen the dividends and stock buybacks for defense contractors, or most favored nation for prescription drugs? Are all these things one-offs that the president thinks are just necessary in the current environment? Because it does go back on years of sort of classic conservatism, some of these moves.
Well, the sort of unfettered free markets have taken us to these gigantic trade deficits. They have allowed China
tariffs, all these things are not classic.
Well, free trade was not fair trade, and free trade doesn't work if you have a gigantic state actor who does not have the same system that you do. Same thing. If we look at most favored nation for drug pricing, what the president realized, and this was his vision and no one else's. For years, the U.S. high drug prices has subsidized innovation. And it was, this is the price we pay. We are subsidizing the rest of the world. And the president looked at these European the national health systems and said, why are they paying less? So the idea here is equalization over time. The U.S. consumer will pay, and our health services will pay less, and the Europeans have to pay more. They've been free riding. In terms of the defense primes, look, these are no different than systemically important banks. They exist at the pleasure of the United States of America. They exist to serve our national defense, and they have failed. They have failed. They are many of them 5 to 7 years behind on their deliveries. In the meantime, they're buying back substantial portions of stock rather than building new facilities. So I think it is a good idea to bring them to heel.
How about the credit cards? When the president and Elizabeth Warren have a meeting of the minds over the phone, a lot of people on the right shudder.
I think that there are a lot of things that we can look at with the credit cards in terms of their practices, in terms of their behaviors, and we'll see where that goes. And it's in terms of Elizabeth Warren, even occasionally she could have one or two good ideas.
I know a lot of expressions that could. Yeah.
No, but I would say that in terms of direction, that the president, the administration, agree with many of Senator Warren's policies that the poorest members of society shouldn't pay the most, but she wants to control credit. She wants to put in more regulation, that under the banking practices that she championed after the great financial crisis, whether it was Dodd-Frank, we have lost 50% of our small and community banks that power Main Street. So everything she has done has been the opposite. But again, I think it is not unreasonable to have a discussion on the practices of these credit card companies.
It's a new world we're in, and enjoy yourself while you're here. I warned you about the Stockholm Syndrome. I've been here many years. It hasn't happened to me at this point. I start feeling it a little bit being here with all the globalists, but I always bounce back once we get back to the great United States.
Well, Joe, we're here to spread the message of American prosperity. Come and join us. America first does not mean America alone, and I think I will not have Davos syndrome.
Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.